truth is now before us. The facts have been examined, and a grand jury comprised of our peers and fellow citizens has made a decision.
So now the doors like flying open like one shot, and then all of a sudden there's a whole lot of shots, and I like both just dropped.
Grand jury proceedings are usually private, but in this case, a judge has ordered them to be released. There's been a lot of public pressure for the audio to be public because of a lot of the questions about the case and what the grand jury heard or didn't hear. So a big question in this case, particularly in the past few days, but in the months since Breonna Taylor was killed, has been, did officers announce their presence before they entered her apartment with a battering ram? They had what's called a no-knock warrant, which means they legally didn't have to announce themselves.
Evidence shows that officers both knocked and announced their presence at the apartment. The officers' statements about their announcement are corroborated by an independent witness who was near in a proximity to apartment 4. In other words, the warrant was not served as a no-knock warrant.
When we all got in line, I knocked on the door, banged on it. We didn't announce the first couple because our intent was not to hit the door. Our intent was to give her plenty of time to come to the door because they said she was probably there alone. So we predetermined to give her plenty of time to come to the door. Banged on the door, no response. Banged on it again, no response. At that point, we started announcing ourselves, please come to the door. Please get a search warrant. While we're doing this, there was a neighbor or somebody upstairs, right on the staircase, that started arguing with Detective Henderson and Lieutenant Hoover. And they were both giving commands to go back into his apartment. And he kept saying, I wasn't really paying attention, but he was saying something about leaving the girl alone or something like that. But while he was doing that, we were still announcing police, come to the door, police search warrant. When we banged, I probably banged on the door six or seven different time periods. Not 6 or 7 times, but 6 or 7 different times. It seems like I'm turning the doorway.
I started putting her clothes, the other knocked at the door. She's like, who is it? Loud at the top of her lungs. No response. So I'm like, what the heck? So then I grabbed my gun, which is legal, like I'm licensed to carry everything. I've never even fired my gun outside of the residence. I was scared to death. So she says that there's another knock at the door. She's yelling at the top of her lungs, and I am too at this point. Who is it? No answer, no response, no anything.
Daniel Cameron said last week that they did still announce themselves, and he's basing that on what the officers themselves told him and on one witness who said that he heard this happen. But it's a little bit tricky because that witness has changed his story. He initially said that he did not hear them announce themselves, later changed it to say that he did hear it, and has even said directly to us, to the Post, that he only heard them mention that they were police in passing to him as he was walking out his door.
The first interview with Mr. Sarpe, what date was that?
It was a phone interview that was conducted on March the 21st, 2020. Mr. Sarpe stated he walked outside and he was told to go back inside. When he looked out of the window, he could see a lot of police cars and saw them in uniform, so he knew it was police. Mr. Sarpe stated no one identified themselves as police, but he knew they were the police because of their uniforms. He stated he did not hear anyone knocking on the apartment door, and they did a second phone interview, which was on Friday, May the 15th. Mr. Sarpe was walking out the door to leave, and he noticed 4 to 5 gentlemen below the apartment stairs. The gentleman ordered him to go back into his apartment. When he went back into his apartment, he heard gunshots, pop, pop, pop. He heard the officers knocking on the door, and they were saying, "This is the cops."
First interview, he didn't hear any knocking, and the second one, he did hear knocking and announcing of police.
Yes, ma'am.
When Attorney General Daniel Cameron initially announced the results of the grand jury's investigation, he made it sound like he walked the grand jurors through all of Kentucky's homicide charges, and that the grand jury agreed with him and with his office that the only charges that were warranted were wanton endangerment charges against a former officer.
Criminal homicide encompasses the taking of a life by another. While there are 6 possible homicide charges under Kentucky law, these charges are not applicable to the facts before us because our investigation showed, and the grand jury agreed, that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in the return of deadly fire after having been fired upon by Kenneth Walker.
He has later sort of reframed the way that he describes what happened, and he said in a statement this week that he only recommended the wanton endangerment charges to the grand jurors. And then again, talking to a local TV station, WDRB, he said more explicitly that he did not recommend homicide charges against any of the officers.
Cameron says presenting the grand jury with a murder charge would not have been appropriate.
They're an independent body. If they wanted to make an assessment about different charges, they could have done that, but our recommendation was that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in their acts and their conduct. There
is inevitably going to be some criticism of any decision where no one is directly charged in the death. Breonna Taylor! This whole protest movement that we've seen for the past several months has been getting accountability and justice in these police killings, and I think many of the protesters don't see this as holding anybody accountable. Not only were there not homicide charges, but none of the charges that were filed were related to her killing.